Hello, this is Robert Rickover at Body Learning, and today my guest is John Riley, who is an attorney living in Seoul, Korea. And with a specialty in immigration law. John has had in-person Alexander technique lessons in the U.S., and more recently he's had a series of Skype sessions with me. And we're going to talk today a little bit about how the Alexander technique has been useful for him and how Skype sessions have compared with in-person lessons for him. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Well, it's kind of funny talking to you without the video.
Yeah.
Before we begin, could you just give our listeners your very short description or definition of the Alexander technique?
Sure. If I was describing Alexander technique to somebody who had never heard of it before, I would say it's a way of relieving body pain, similar to massage or physical therapy. But as opposed to those methods that treat the symptoms of the body pain, Alexander technique to me really teaches you how to learn how to use your body in a more efficient manner, so you don't end up having the body pain in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I would describe it to somebody who's never heard of it before. Yeah.
And what initially brought you to the technique when you were living in the U.S.?
Body pain. Yeah, I was 20 years old, and it was during my undergraduate studies. I was a piano performance major, and I was having really bad shoulder back pain. So I tried different methods. I tried exercise. I tried yoga. I tried stretching. I tried Feldenkrais. I tried a lot of different ways to relieve that pain of practicing every day for 4 or 5 hours. And they had an Alexander technique class at the acting school at my university, in the acting department. It was taught by a ballet teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, they did a couple sessions, and I instantly could recognize that this is a very, very powerful and effective technique for managing, relieving pain, and also I found out incidentally for increasing coordination and poise and balance, and I found it affected my playing in a really positive way.
Mm-hmm. And so did you go on to have individual private lessons after the
Yeah,
classes? Yeah.
yeah. After the classes, I probably had, over the course of a few years, I probably had 20, 25, maybe even 30 lessons
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in person. Yeah.
Right. And then and apart from the pain issues and improved coordination issues, is there any way in which the technique specifically helped you with your work as an attorney?
As an attorney, I mean, yeah, I mean, generally, I have more. See, I don't think of it directly that way. It has an indirect effect because I have more freedom and more poise, and I feel less stress at work. So, I sit long hours. Uh, I spend many hours a day in front of the computer.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm able to use the directions that we talk about, and that I've learned from my Alexander lessons while I do mundane tasks such as sitting at the computer, typing, speaking with clients. Yeah. It definitely has an effect on my life overall. So my working as an attorney is part of that. So yes, it does affect that as well.
Mm-hmm. And for our listeners who may not know what directions are, could you say a word or two about those?
Well, you know, there's traditional Alexander technique directions like my neck is free, or let my neck be free so my head can bounce forward and up. But there's other types of directions that you've uh, given me as well.
Mm-hmm.
more simplified directions.
Hmm.
I think of them as, I am free, or my neck is free, or, you know, kind of these directions you give yourself, um, to see what changes happen.
Hmm.
And then you kind of let the direction go. And that's kind of like, because like we don't really know where the tension is and we don't really know where the problem is, like giving your direction and letting the direction go is kind of like a methodology you've taught me to kind of like figure out where the problem is, in the first place, to be able to, to be able to work on that.
Hmm.
So yeah, direction is just like a simple, it's just a simple thing you tell yourself, like I'm free, or like my neck is free, or uh, just one of many kinds of directions that, you learn in the Skype lessons, or in lessons with an Alexander teacher in general.
Hmm. And for someone listening to this, would you, who hasn't had any Alexander experience, would you say that using Alexander directions on your own for yourself is a difficult process, or how would you describe that to somebody?
Um, I think I don't think you have to have in-person lessons first to be able to benefit,
Hmm.
from just the Skype lessons.
Hmm.
It might seem like a little bit, I guess it would depend who the teacher is, but it might seem a little bit hard to grasp at first, or a little bit too vague.
Hmm.
But I think that's where, having a good teacher, if you just tell somebody like I'm free, or like my neck is free, they might, have no idea what to do with that. But if you have the teacher like kind of guiding you through the steps, I
Hmm.
don't really think, at least in my opinion, like I don't think the in-person lessons are a necessary prerequisite to benefiting from the Skype lessons, and just giving the directions to yourself, or with the help of a teacher.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean the directions are pretty simple, but there are some traps, some potential traps or obstacles that it's probably helpful to have a teacher work through with you.
Yeah, I mean, you gave some really great analogies. I remember like when I read about the freedom directions, and I read about, the center of gravity.
Hmm.
It was a little hard for me, to fully grasp those concepts by myself. But I remember, like, even in the first lesson, you gave some really good, advice related to those, and a really good analogy you gave the first lesson about, I think it was like a World War II analogy, or something, like where, like I didn't want to get caught up in the minutia of how everything worked, which is what my kind of natural instinct is,
Hmm.
the small details, so to speak. But just more like, it was just my job to set the intention. This is what I want my body to do, and then my body kind of naturally figures it out, like how, or it figures out the most efficient way to do that.
Hmm. Hmm.
That was a very useful analogy that you gave. I thought it was really, really helpful for understanding, that whole kind of framework of, setting the intention of what you want to do, but not kind of like making yourself do specific tasks or specific functions, or be coordinated in a specific way.
Right, or any kind of micromanaging, right? It's
Exactly.
just not going to work. So,
Exactly.
do you have a view from your experience about the relative pros and cons of an in-person lesson? Obviously, teachers are able to use their hands to guide you in an in-person lesson, and that's not the case with a Skype session. What's your overall take on the pros and cons of those two types of ways of learning the technique?
I mean, the hands-on work is definitely, it can definitely have some really great benefits. I
Hmm.
don't want to like undersell that, because, I thought it was really amazing. I can still remember like some of the first lessons with table work that I did,
Hmm.
and, sitting in a chair, and or getting in and out of a chair, and, hands on the back of a chair, and some of those like kind of traditional work that would normally happen in an in-person lesson.
Hmm.
Um, and I remember some kind of real deep releases in like really deep habitual tensions, especially like in my shoulders and back.
Hmm. Hmm.
However, I also like I also like the kind of like the freedom with the Skype lessons because you're not told through somebody else's hands like how like your best how your body functions most efficiently.
Hmm.
And I kind of like the Skype lessons like make you work through that aspect of it kind of on your own,
Hmm.
just with the direction. So for me, like it's kind of like I don't want to say you can become lazy with like a teacher, like a hands-on teacher. I don't think it's that, but it's kind of like you have to really it kind of forces you to um become really in touch with yourself and not be so reliant on like somebody else's feedback for your own learning, which I thought was really great.
Hmm.
And for me, it kind of simplified it because like if I'm just sitting there in silence and getting hands-on work, my mind can start that kind of micromanaging, that process. But with the Skype lessons and with the kind of the more the freedom-based directions,
Hmm.
like it really kind of kept me out of that. Kind of kept me out of that mindset,
Hmm.
So it was more like a indirect discovery process of myself through the Skype lessons, and I really appreciate it. So, yeah, I mean, if I wouldn't say not to have in-person lessons, but I think I think there's definitely advantages to both.
Hmm. And so if someone, for example, does not have access to a teacher, and there is a possibility of Skype sessions, you would have no hesitation in recommending that
Oh, absolutely
approach to
not.
them. Yeah, yeah,
I mean,
because
in my opinion, that's the main difference between, Alexander and like physical therapy or massage is that you don't need that. It's not a relief. It's not like really a relief of symptoms technique. It's really like it's a way of retraining how you think.
yes, yeah,
And
yeah.
I mean, that's the key difference. So, the hands-on work, in my opinion, it's a kind of feedback for that, but it's really not the core essence of what Alexander technique is, at least in my amateur opinion.
Well, no, I don't I actually don't disagree with you on that at all. Is there anything else that you would like to say to our listeners about either the technique or Skype sessions or anything related to what we've been talking about?
All I would say is I wouldn't hesitate. I wouldn't hesitate getting Skype lessons or using the technique in general. I mean, you definitely, in my opinion, it's one of the most cost-effective and efficient, best ways that you can, spend your money on. And I don't want to sound like an advertisement, but I really honestly believe that because just the benefits you get back in your thinking and kind of clarity of mind and efficiency of movement,
Hmm.
and poise and balance and coordination. It really it pays off so much more than anything else that, I've ever used in my life. So yeah, I totally recommend this 100% to anybody that's interested.
Well, I think this would be a great place to end our conversation. My guest today has been John Riley. He's an attorney living in Seoul, Korea, and he has a bit of a specialty in immigration law. And John, and I'll put a link next to this website to next to this interview to a website that'll give you more information about the Alexander technique if you'd like to learn more, and will enable you to find either an in-person teacher if one's available where you live, or a teacher who uses Skype for teaching. John, thank you so much for this.
Thank you, Robert.